fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organization should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. You can't agree to that. How are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the major's. The major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me, and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
It's a goodbye.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we try to question everything. We cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. So glad to have you here. Thank you guys so much for subscribing, whether it's on Rumble, on YouTube, on X. Good to see all of you guys. We've got a busy show for you on this Tuesday. We're going to talk about the real reason why the United States and Israel invaded Gaza. The United States weapons, of course, are the big piece of this puzzle. But what is the real reason behind it? We warned against false flags from the very beginning. And these elites are sort of sitting back, laughing at all of us, you know, all of the back and forth on Twitter and everyone fighting on social media, and all families are being broken apart because they're arguing about it. And they are making billions of dollars, and their plan is unfolding. So we're going to talk about all of that tonight on the show.
We're going to talk about the World Health Organization and their pandemic treaty, and how they are saying that if you are worried about it, you are a victim of misinformation. They're lying. They're spreading misinformation in order to make you think that the intention of their pandemic treaty is misinformation. It's not, and we're going to show you it. Again, we've been looking at it at the actual document. So we're not going to bring you any extrapolation, just their own documents.
Yeah, it's their own words printed out, and this is all unfolding right before our eyes, and we've been warning about it for many, many months here on the show. We're also going to look at Canada, which we've been warning about, because I don't know what is going on in Canada, but they are moving to ban Tucker Carlson from entering their country.
From existing?
That they probably would like that, but they're trying to ban him from actually entering into Calgary specifically, and we're going to talk about what this means and how they're going to try to keep him away from the border from giving a speech in Canada. All of that, plus we're going to talk Portugal's Green Deal and how there's a big scandal resulting in these ESG and green net zero plans. Is net zero a total scam?
Well, it's cost one major politician his job. The Prime Minister of Portugal has resigned, begging the question, is the Green Deal a scam that will cost more and more politicians their careers? For what? All of that and more as Redacted starts right now.
Good to see everyone. Night Gazer says Klaus Schwabland. Nice to see you. Barb in Florida is here. Let us know where you're joining us from around the world. We are live. It is 4 p.m. Eastern time in the United States. Let us know what you're joining us from. A lot of you guys watch from Australia early in the morning, so it's breakfast time down under. Good to see you guys. Which I guess it's it's almost summertime now. Yeah, it's almost summertime in. Isn't that weird? I always get the reverse. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have news to get to that is not the weather. We're going to talk geopolitics today, as we normally do. Thank you for that weather report, Shirley. We're going to talk about war, unfortunately. That's kind of what we do here. We talk about the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. We do not have an agenda. We just do the research and bring you things that are usually quite uncomfortable. So I don't know how comfortable you are with Clayton giving you the weather.
Hey, maybe you weren't uncomfortable with the newsletter this morning. We have a daily newsletter, and one of the things featured in the newsletter is how a woman in Wisconsin wants to stop calling snowmen because it's not inclusive enough.
They have to be snow people.
Snow people. This is the clown world that we navigate. Anyway, we wrote about that in the newsletter this morning, and it's free. And you could read it in about 5 or 10 minutes over your cup of coffee, delivered right to your inbox. And it's a great way to stay connected because these platforms love to deplatform us and censor us and block us. And so it's a great way to have we're able to connect with you directly outside of these platforms. All you need to do to sign up, again, it's free. Go to redacted.inc, put in your email address. You will receive a welcome email. You just need to confirm it. So it might go to your spam folder when you receive that welcome email. It'll come from my email, Clayton at redacted.inc, and just drag it into your inbox, and you'll receive it tomorrow morning. On Wednesday, you can get the newsletter About 7 a.m. Eastern time is when we publish that puppy.
That woman also says that Christmas decorations should not be in red and green because that's not inclusive either, because only Christians use red and green, apparently. No, I mean, retailers use red and green, so
Yeah, what
I don't
the hell
know.
is she talking
So
about?
she thinks that Christmas colors should now be purple and blue. I don't know why we're giving preference to color.
I'm just thinking in general, we should just ignore this woman. Her advice does not seem to be applicable.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good plan. Let's ignore this woman. Keep
Yeah.
putting up your red and green for Christmas. And
If you want, do what you want.
yeah,
Excuse me.
I'll drive by her snowman and make it anatomically correct, if you know what I mean.
You can make it yellow if you know what I mean.
Just give me some carrots.
When are they going to take the word man out of woman? Like, that hasn't happened yet.
Yes. Can we do that soon?
We need our own word. I don't know.
All right, let's get to it. Let's get to the news. Well, not long ago, a top-ranking U.S. general said Americans must be ready to fight and die for Israel. So you might be asking yourself, why? Why would we send American soldiers to die in Israel? A friend of mine reminded me of this today, actually, this General Clark. You're probably smart enough to wonder, by now you are, what's the real reason that the United States and Israel are taking over Gaza? Is it really about Hamas, as neocons and Netanyahu would have us believe, or is Hamas the perfect cover to seize control of massive natural gas deposits that Palestinians own and control offshore, off the shore of Gaza and the Gaza Strip? Call me cynical, but I have heard this story before. Western powers using the cover of terrorism to seize control over massive oil and gas resources and oceanfront property so they can build ports. There's a reason we don't give a shit about landlocked Afghanistan. But we are building a second military base in Iraq, and where we're building that military base is right on or right next to Iraqi oil fields. So, of course, I thought we weren't in Iraq anymore. Like, why? And we're now building a second base, but this time it's right near oil fields. So we need to make sure we have control of that oil. Last week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was asked, how long will Israeli forces occupy Gaza after it's been destroyed? His response wasn't a surprise to me at all, or anybody watching this show, I'm sure. Watch.
President Biden has said that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza. Who should govern Gaza when this is over?
Those who don't want to continue the way of Hamas. It certainly is not. I think Israel will, for an indefinite period, will have the overall security responsibility, because we've seen what happens when we don't have it. When we don't have that security responsibility, what we have is the eruption of Hamas terror on a scale that we couldn't imagine.
Yeah, so of course they will occupy it indefinitely, even after Hamas is long gone, because it was never about Hamas in the first place. Wake up. They're playing us like a fiddle once again. They love nothing more than to watch people argue on Twitter. You're an anti-Semite. You're pro-Palestinian. Does Israel have the right to exist? You don't think Israel has a right to exist? What's wrong with you? Stop killing babies. These elites are running around. They're running the show right now. They're just laughing all the way to the bank because their plan is rolling out exactly the way they want for everyone to be fighting about it. While innocent people, of course, are being killed. They don't really care about innocent people at all. And the same thing happened in Iraq. Millions of Iraqi civilians died as a result. Thousands of American soldiers died in this boondoggle. And remember Madeleine Albright when asked about collateral damage of children? When civilians are being killed, children are being killed. What were her exact words?
She said it was worth it.
It was worth it. So this is how they think. They don't really give a rat's behind about you. They care about their long-term plans. And we warned on this show from the very, very beginning of the Israeli conflict to beware of false flags. So let's come back to this whole thing in a second here. But first, some context around natural gas. Over the past week, it started getting cold in Europe. And this weekend, Europe started using that natural gas. It's stored up as a safety mechanism against an energy disaster that could face Europe. Across the board, countries in the EU started drawing supplies in order to heat homes and businesses. Then temperatures went back up a little bit in certain areas. But as soon as temperatures fall again, the same thing is going to happen. Tapping into this backup supply after the United States destroyed Europe's Nord Stream pipeline. It was a brilliant move by the United States, cut off Europe's flow of cheap natural gas from Russia and force Europe to buy it from the United States. It's a brilliant move, right? It's a brilliant business move. And that's exactly what happened. Europe started paying nearly double the prices that they used to pay to Russia. U.S. companies started turning record profits. Last year, Europe became the #1 destination for natural gas sales for U.S. companies, setting a new record. Look at this chart. This chart's amazing. Instead of a simple pipeline delivering gas to Germany and Europe, look at this. Now this massive spike to Europe from United States liquefied gas exports. Surging, of course, now to Europe. Instead of a simple pipeline delivering gas to Germany and Europe, now the United States puts it on liquefied natural gas on ships like this, and it transports it across the ocean. There's your green plan. That's a brilliant idea, right? We're all about environmental concerns. So instead of a clean gas pipeline that delivers it, no, let's go through all of the extra legwork and cost. Carbon footprint and putting it on a boat.
On diesel.
Probably. What else is going to? It's not solar panels, right? I wonder if it runs on natural gas. Actually, that'd be brilliant.
And it usually is a cleaner source of energy, but not if you ship it, all the way around the world. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, add in the extra layer of carbon.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just going to say it, but it gives them a reason to not have to listen to people up in arms about fracking. They're like, we don't need to listen to these people anymore. We can get it overseas and not have to fight these people.
Yeah, we don't have to do it in our own backyard. We'll just buy it from America where they do fracking. So American companies are putting this liquefied natural gas on these ships, transporting it across the ocean. Europe pays almost 50% more. Anywhere, the prices range anywhere from like 35% more up to 50% more. Remember, German politicians outraged. They're like, why the hell are we buying our stuff now from America? We played you those sound bites here, members of the German Bundestag. So, in fact, right after the United States blew up the pipeline, natural gas exports to Europe exploded. Look at this chart. Look at the blue bars to the right of your screen, and look how China and Asia declined in American exports. China started getting more from Russia. Of course, the Belt and Road Initiative is going to help all of that, right? And Europe started getting all of their natural gas from the United States. And it's about to get much worse. According to Bloomberg, demand for natural gas is set to rise through the region, not going to slow down anytime soon. In fact, according to the EU's top energy official, says that the U.S. gas will be needed for decades. Decades. U.S. gas will be needed for decades to come, and without it, EU would face disaster, they admit. It's amazing how that happens. So then let's circle back to Gaza and a couple of points here, just so we have that context there. In the year 2000, there was a shocking discovery made right off the coast of Gaza in Palestinian-controlled ocean waters. It just so happened that geologists found a massive natural gas deposit. Whoa, really? So this deposit could transform a country, transform it, lift it out of poverty, completely alter it. Just look what it did to Norway in the 1960s. Norway, of course, went from being a poor fishing country to the most economically advanced country in the world. Norway leads every major category, from healthcare to life expectancy to income to safety, all thanks to oil, and they get to keep their own oil. Imagine that. They find it, they bring it out of the ocean, they get to keep the profits. Isn't that a novel idea?
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that's what Venezuela wanted to do. They wanted to basically give the oil back to the people, and America was like, no, we have too much interest in your oil down there. Let's form a coup.
Yeah, right. They did have to, in Norway, fight the United Kingdom for rights to some of those Black Sea deposits. So it wasn't as easy as that, but they won most of it.
Yeah. Well, it turns out Britain has very long tendrils, which we'll see here in a second. So imagine, though, if African countries got to keep their own oil instead of the United States, France, and the UK. Can you imagine that? These African countries.
Every dictator that has imagined that found itself on the business end of a U.S. bomb.
Yeah, a business end of a coup, right? And those that are in power, of course, have aligned themselves with the UK government, with France, with the United States, mostly in Britain and France. And so all of the money and riches, of course, flows out into Europe rather than into those African countries, of course. So could you imagine a prosperous Africa? What would that look like? You can't, because we steal all their resources and their wealth. So you can't imagine that. But we'll do Christmas songs, to raise money for feeding kids in Africa. We'll do Christmas songs, and we'll get like Bono and Sting together, and we'll do those Christmas songs, and that'll raise money for them. So I'm sure that's the same thing as having billions of dollars in oil profits. Well, the same thing is about to happen to Gaza. As Jana points out here, the field was discovered in 2000 by BG Group, but as of 2021, its exploitation is still subject to negotiations. It's been estimated that Gaza Marine contains, which is a deposit, contains upwards of 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And RT just did a great report on this Palestinian gas that sits right next to Gaza and the oil in the West Bank. Check this out.
This is a historical moment in which the small country of Israel becomes a significant...
You probably wouldn't know it, but Gaza is rich, gas rich, at least 1.4 trillion cubic feet rich, to be precise. But there's a catch.
Geologists and natural resources economists have confirmed that the occupied Palestinian territory lies above sizable reservoirs of oil and natural gas wealth in Area C of the occupied West Bank and the Mediterranean coast off the Gaza Strip. To date, the real and opportunity costs of the occupation exclusively in the area of oil and natural gas have accumulated to tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars.
Back in 1999, the Palestinian authorities signed a deal with British Gas. Just off the Gaza coast, they struck it lucky, and 2 wells were drilled. That's Gaza Marine 1 and 2. It was a multi-billion-dollar gift from God, an economic boon both home and abroad.
This is one of the key messages here today. There will be gas available for export. And from my conversations with Palestinian officials, including President Arafat, it is clear that they have no interest in just sitting on a gas surplus.
Fast forward to 2007, Hamas comes to power, and Israel launches an offensive on the Gaza Strip, leaving behind 1,400 dead Palestinians, but taking with it the gas fields. Now, within the year, Israel announced the discovery of the Leviathan natural gas field, which did include Gaza's riches, all in all valued at $453 billion.
So imagine what they could do with that money. In 2011, Israel tried to take control over the natural gas deposits that belonged to the Palestinians. So Israel tried to step in and swoop in and take the money and the wealth associated with those natural gas deposits and oil. Even Wikipedia, we know how corrupt Wikipedia is, right? Even Wikipedia explains how this went down. How under peace negotiations, Israel asked for control of all fuel and revenues destined for Gaza and the West Bank. That was about 12 years ago. So just to underline that point, hey, we're trying to find some common ground here in these peace negotiations, and as part of the negotiations, you want all of my oil and natural gas. How exactly does that work? So you want us to admit that Israel exists as a country.
And also admit that Israel has historical rights to the territory as well. Israel only asks the Palestinians to acknowledge that. They don't ask any other country to acknowledge that. That's part of the continued way that they kind of bomb these negotiations.
And also give us all of your oil and gas and the wealth associated with it. Well, of course, surprisingly, the Palestinians rejected that offer. Still, the natural gas just sits there. Why? Well, Shell, BG Group, which is now Shell, backed out under pressure from Israel, and no other company wants to touch it for fear of being blacklisted by Israel. Why won't BP touch it? Why won't Exxon touch it? Well, if you do, you'll feel the wrath of the Israeli government. In the meantime, Israel wants to become a new distributor of natural gas to Europe at the same time that Russian gas has been cut off. Iran is sanctioned and Syria is under U.S. occupation, squatting on their oil reserves. So in 2022, Israel's energy minister said this.
This is a historical moment in which the small country of Israel becomes a significant player in the global energy market. The Memorandum of Understanding will enable Israel, for the first time, to export Israeli natural gas to Europe. And it is even more impressive looking at the significant set of agreements we signed over the last year, which position Israel and the Israeli energy and water sectors as a key global player.
Oh, okay. So Palace, it turns out... Go ahead.
Does that mean Jason Bourne that we talked about yesterday potentially worked for Israel?
Going down and looking
to blow up the Nord Stream pipeline?
Perhaps, in fact, that is true. So turns out that Palestinians have long been in the way. As a now declassified memo from July of 1963 shows us, Israel, of course, rolled out a plan to build the Ben Gurion Canal. As some of you in the chat have been pointing out, saying, Clayton, do not forget about the Ben Gurion Canal. Yes, we're not forgetting about it. Here we are to talk about it because they can't control the Suez Canal. So build one themselves, the Ben Gurion Canal, that connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf and connects the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean as a result. And by the way, the Suez Canal, of course, and the Straits of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, by all accounts, now under the control of BRICS, right? BRICS nations. So, of course, like this plan is still there, and you would absolutely want to have control of your own canal and the transport. As the memo points out from 1963, they would use nuclear explosives to clear the site, which conveniently sits next to where Palestinians live. And they would use conventional explosives then in Gaza, where it's a more populated area. This is literally in the memo, and I'll quote it exactly from the Israeli government at the bottom of your screen here. Approximately 130 miles of the 160-mile length of the route are in virtually unpopulated desert wasteland and are thus amenable to nuclear excavation methods. Conventional methods could be used in the vicinity of the populated areas and near the coastal plain near Gaza. So that's all right there. You can read the nuclear explosives used for the creation of the Ben Gurion Canal. Here's what it would have looked like right there. Of course, you can see it going right through Gaza. So they would have control. So it is remarkable that Gaza is rich in recently discovered natural gas and oil. It's very curious then why Western leaders are totally fine with Israel invading Gaza and the West Bank to take indefinite control over these oil-rich areas. And this is all happening while Europe needs a lot of natural gas. And the United States just blew up their pipeline. This has nothing to do with terrorism. It has everything to do with money and the control of natural resources. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I think they like to wrap themselves in a blanket of terrorism, and that's how they justify these things. And absolutely, this is not to downplay what happened on October 7th. Yes, horrible, absolutely devastating what happened on October 7th. What happened on September 11th was absolutely horrible and devastating. But it's the response and it's the underlying politics at play here that are driving all of this, I believe.
Right. And I don't understand how people who are pro the Israeli response continue to use 9/11 as if it is a successful roadmap. Like, right. Hey, the United States had 9/11. They waged 20 years of war on the Middle East and killed millions of civilians. That was fine. So Israel should do it too. 9/11 should be a cautionary tale of how not to respond. So I don't understand these comparisons as if, an Israeli minister this weekend said, well, no one put a time limit on, America's response to 9/11. That's not a good thing. That's not something that we should be emulating. Or anyone should be saying, that was good. We'll do it like they did.
I mean, Israel really wants to become the hub of oil and natural gas in that area. They want to be the ones that are providing the oil and gas to Europe.
Right.
They want to be the hub.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to make that money off of selling oil and natural gas into Germany and, forget Russia. Now that Russia, of course, is pipeline destroyed, Syria and Iran under sanctions, right? As RT reported, so that opens up Israel. Instead of having to ship it all the way from the United States, you could have this hub for Israel with all of that natural gas and oil that you could sell and make a lot of billions of dollars off of. So are the Palestinians ever going to get back control of this oil and gas?
Right, especially as the end goal is to occupy that region or get them all out. Are they going to let them work from abroad? Like, hey, can we
You can work remotely.
Yeah, work remotely too.
We're going to push you out into the Sinai Desert in a tent. You can live in tents.
But you still can manage your oil and gas exports.
Right. Let's see how that's going to go.
Right.
Let's believe that if we see it. Yeah, I don't know.
We'll know how sizable it is, though, when the U.S. steps in to protect Israel's oil.
Like they did in Syria.
Happens,
yeah, like they do in Syria. They're
like we do in Syria. And Iraq. You know, if you've got oil, we want to protect it. We're here for you.
Right.
We've got a super chat here who from Anwar says, do you think Putin and his allies are aware of this natural gas deposit? If so, what are they thinking? I'm sure they're aware of it, but I mean, they're so massively oil rich that I don't think they're looking to swoop in and set up shop right on the right on the Gaza coast. I don't know how that would fly. But I'm sure they're absolutely aware of it. There's nothing that they're not aware of in that regard, I'm sure. But great question. Great question. We've got more news to get to here on your Taco Tuesday.
Coming up, we're going to talk about the World Health Organization and how they're lying to you, saying that your worries about their pandemic treaty are misinformation and fake news. We're going to show it to you from the horse's mouth. We don't have a horse, but we have PDF documents, so that's just as good.
It's like a horse.
I'm going to ride in on my PDFs and show you some stuff. Plus, we're going to talk about Canada wanting to ban Tucker Carlson and the downfall of Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa. We're going to have a guest on who's going to tell us about whether or not this is indicative of politicians sort of falling on the sword. Is it dying on the sword? I die on the hill or I fall on the sword?
You fall on the sword.
Falling on the sword of the Green New Deal. And whether or not he's just the first of many to sell us a bridge over green initiatives.
So here's one thing you should know about my beautiful wife is that she's very, very smart, highly intelligent, but she cannot do idioms to save her life.
I always get like one bit of it wrong. Like, oh, I'm going to die on that hill,
Right. Or no, I'm
like that's the hill I'm going to die on.
Yeah, an apple a day keeps the dentist away, or like there's always something.
Yeah. So okay, so then are you going to die on the sword of the Green New Deal? That makes sense.
I guess, yeah, or die on the vine.
No,
fall on the sword, die on the vine.
Die on the vine means it's left to wither.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anyway,
we're meant to be because I can't figure them out.
Sorry, you guys. I've had this cold for a few days and I did not bring my regular voice back. And I just want to keep coughing every time it's my turn to talk, but I'm going to try and get through the sponsor. I should have brought a lozenge.
A lozenge?
I did not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first, before we get to the World Health Organization treaty, I want to tell you about our friends over at Aura, because have you ever Googled yourself and were you shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? I try not to Google myself because I don't want to see who's saying crappy things about our journalism. So I would sooner Google myself than I read a joke this weekend about a comedian who said he would rather put his tongue in an electrical socket than do that. So you know what you can do is have a company like Aura who will do it for you. Watch out for where you're listed, where your information is listed in nefarious places, and then you don't have to do that because that is not fun. Aura helps to make sure that data brokers are not making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, or other people who want to learn more about you, like maybe where you live. Aura can identify which data brokers are exposing your information and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Brokers are legally required to remove your information if they're asked, but they make it so hard to do. So Aura can just handle it. Plus, Aura is easy to use. The customer support is fantastic. They can keep you safe online so you can focus on other tasks like just not being obsessed with who's saying what about you or selling your data online. So right now you can get started with a free 2-week trial by going to aura.com/redacted. Again, you get a free 14-day trial. See where all your personal information is. Then you can relax. You don't have to set a Google alert and then get bummed out if someone says something you don't like. Aura.com/redacted. All right. So Clayton's shaking his head at me like, yeah, people say crappy things about us on the internet because we have dangerous journalism.
Oh, yeah.
We tell the truth. And then every day we get like someone who says that, you're a slut or you're a Russian bot or whatever, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, someone posted a nasty thing on her Instagram with her kids, with like picture with her and our kids, and someone like left this like nasty message. I'm like, who took time out of their day to type like a nasty message like that to some human being?
It was like us at a beach, you know, and they're like, look at you, you little slut groomer. It's like me in a bathing suit with my daughters.
Jesus.
I know. It's okay. You know what? I don't care. Like, I literally don't. Most things I don't really take all that personally. It doesn't bother me. My favorite comment ever on the internet was when someone said,
no, you're not going to say that one.
Yeah, I am going to say that one.
Oh, okay.
Not the...
Okay, I was going to say.
No, not that one.
Okay,
that one I would never. I can't say that.
Flagged. You can't say that one here.
No, it's the one that said, hey, you C-word, you have a super greasy forehead. Don't you have any pride?
You C-word.
I loved it. And I can take it for whatever reason, because, like, so who hates themselves so much that they have to say that to somebody else? And sometimes,
I love it. I mean, it's people.
I don't care.
It's like, oh my God.
But maybe some other day we'll tell you the one that I whispered, because that was
we'll do that on a private live stream.
That was not G-rated. Okay. Okay. Let's move on from that.
Hold on. You gather yourself. Okay. I want to read this super chat from Marguerite. Says Bloomberg News, August 2016, Eli Lake. George Soros funded pro-Palestinian entities as well as Hamas in order to destabilize the pro-Israeli lobby in the United States and abroad. George knows. Yeah, George Soros. They might not really be. I talked to a couple of Israeli friends. They're like, yeah, they're not. George Soros not really a big deal. This was before the October 7th attack. I'm like, I wonder if George Soros is now a big deal in Israel. He wasn't before. Maybe he is now. We'll see.
Okay. I want to just put this back. Okay. All right. You do that.
All
right. Well, the World Health Organization is lying. They're telling us that they don't want to take away the power of governments and be the world's decision maker. This is part of the pandemic treaty that we've been talking about. This is not a conspiracy. I'm going to show it to you from the horse's mouth, the horse being the World Health Organization. I think it's because so many people are waking up to just how terrifying this is and asking their governments to please not sign this document, not sign their country up for the WHO pandemic treaty. Well, now the head of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, is saying that reports about the pandemic treaty that are telling you that they're scary are fake news. They're misinformation. They're false. That in and of itself is misinformation. Here's this tweet from just a few days ago. It says, we find ourselves in a time where fake news, lies, conspiracy theorists, misinformation, and disinformation are rampant. These are individuals who, whether they genuinely believe it or not, are spreading false claims about the pandemic accord that require our attention. Some argue this agreement will undermine a country's sovereignty by giving power to the WHO. They claim that the WHO will impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates on countries. However, it's important to make clear that these claims are completely unfounded, untrue, nonsense, have no basis in reality. To be clear, the accord does not grant the WHO any such authority. I strongly urge all countries involved in the pandemic negotiations to actively counter these false narratives. Let's remember this. He's asking your government to track and stop your freedom of speech. Like, hey, don't let people say this anymore. That is an important paragraph. He says it's important for them to communicate with their own citizens, assuring them that this agreement explicitly protects their country's sovereignty. There should be no room for doubt or confusion on this matter. Okay, authoritarian much? No room for doubt or confusion? How about discussion? Like, okay.
No, they love to control Google search results.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion leads to doubt, and you can't have that. So no discussion.
Right.
That's out. No.
Okay, well, while we're free to discuss it, I would just like to remind you the things that are written in this document that prove that he's lying. That, in fact, it does take away government sovereignty. It does give them the right to impose lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at it ourselves. Because here is the vision from the draft that was released earlier this year. It says that, I just highlighted the word binding, how many times, that this draft was written with the intention of putting in place binding and some non-binding legally binding elements. And what binding powers do they want? Well, they haven't exactly told us yet because this is still in draft. Here is from the draft that was released this February saying they want control of all of these things, such as to define what things are a pathogen or has pandemic potential. They want to define a One Health approach and also One Health surveillance. The things that are circled here in red are the things that I just found the scariest. You can highlight other things if you want. Infodemic, interpandemic, and also they want to define recovery. So they decide when it's over, when it's done. Now, again, potential seems to leave a lot of room for everything to become a pandemic. One Health surveillance, they're going to show us what that is. I'm going to show you more about it. Now, the word infodemic, I really don't like. Interpandemic, let's just, I don't know, like a pandemic within a pandemic. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Interpandemic, it could be several things at once. We don't know because they've left these undefined as of yet as they steamroll us into a vote to give them these powers, even though we don't know exactly what is written there. Now, the word infodemic is the thing that makes me the most upset because back in May, when the WHO revised other documents to lay the groundwork for the pandemic treaty, they defined infodemic this way. They say this new information ecosystem has generated a new health threat that accompanies epidemics and pandemics called infodemic. It's the overabundance of information, accurate or not, which makes it difficult for individuals to adopt behaviors that will protect their health and the health of their families and communities. The infodemic can directly impact health. Let me just finish this, and I do want to hear what you have to say. Infodemic cannot be eliminated. It can only be managed. And that's why WHO and partners have developed the approach of infodemic management. Now, I want you to look closely at the thing that says accurate or not, because they want to control information, even true information, if it means that your behavior is antithetical to what they want. So an infodemic can be true. And we've seen that a lot of the things that were shared during the COVID-19 pandemic turned out to be true and caused them a problem because it made people do behaviors that they didn't like. So infodemic is the thing that really keeps me up at night. David, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, fortunately, Google has a vaccine for that where they're going to inoculate us with the right information.
Right.
So,
that's right. What did they call it? Google is calling it... I
thought they called it inoculation.
Inoculation.
Information.
That's right. That's right. Now, how... I may ask you, how can they root out possible infodemics? How can they make sure you're not looking at true information that they don't want you to see? Oh, well, they call it social listening. This also is from the proposed pandemic treaty. They want to tackle false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation with conducting regular social listening and analysis. Okay. Could another word for that be surveillance?
Or spying, collaborating, and canoodling.
Excuse me.
Canoodling with
canoodling.
I just feel like canoodling. They like to canoodle with the social media networks. You know, they have that back door. You know, so that they can canoodle with.
Well, the White House did that on behalf of information that came from the WHO, I suppose. But the WHO, as far as we know, has not had backdoor channels to social media. Although it's worth pointing out that if we are to say something that counters what the WHO says right now on YouTube, YouTube uses that as a basis to either remove or penalize videos. So the WHO does have that back end, at least on this platform. Was somebody
and I want to point out, too, Nikki Haley was just on Fox News, and here has the tweet, and she says, every person on social media should be verified by their name because of national security.
National security, you say?
Yeah. So now verified by our name, then they would be able to better know what we're sharing and everything like that, and it would be verified so that they can, come after us if we share the wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean,
we're part of the wrong thing. If we're part of wrong thing, they'll come after us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Social listening, I just wonder, does that supersede the U.S. right to privacy or the European right to privacy or any other right to privacy? The WHO also in this pandemic treaty gives itself the right to redistribute everything, basically, where you buy your clothes, where the clothes are made, where the clothes are farmed, what sheep they come from, that thread, where your animals are butchered or slaughtered, where they are farmed, where they are grown, what vegetables are grown where. They literally say here that the parties will identify and integrate into relevant pandemic prevention and preparedness plans that addresses the drivers of the emergence and reemergence of disease at the human-animal environment interface, including but not limited to climate change, land use change, wildlife trade, desertification, and antimicrobial resistance. So by this, everything can be declared a possible climate risk. Oh, because those sheep graze there, that ammonia that they pee could lead to this, and that will possibly create some kind of disease, so we can no longer farm sheep, that kind of thing. Like literally anything can fall into that. So redistributing wealth, resources. The document also addresses strengthening healthcare workforce to make sure that the world, if they handle another pandemic, will not do so with the same gender disparities we had during the first one. They're really working on, and they're worried about the fact that the workforce of healthcare was not diverse enough. Here's what they say there, that we need to address gender disparities and inequalities within the healthcare workforce, more representation, engagement. I mean, was it a problem that there were too many women working in healthcare, and that was disproportionately hard for them? Was this a problem that there were not enough women, or there were too many women? We know that the pandemic was disproportionately hard on women, and a lot of women who had their children at home, right? So they're saying they want more women to be, I'm not sure what they're saying. They just need to be focused on gender and it's a solution in search of a problem. Now, the document does say that it takes state sovereignty into consideration, that it's not meant to supersede your country's own laws and rules and ability to govern itself. But they did change their international health regulations back in May of 2023, meaning that not just the pandemic document is going to supersede state sovereignty, but mere participation in the WHO could supersede your state sovereignty. Here's the document we talked about that was changed in the spring. These edits go with the pandemic treaty powers, meaning they're just revamping their overall powers in anticipation of the pandemic treaty. You can already see how this is going to go based on the first page of edits, where they say that their recommendations they cross out non-binding. No, they're binding. Let's not write that anymore. This is where we're going. That's their edits, you guys, not mine. And does it only kick in when we're in a pandemic? No, it kicks in only when they feel like we are in the need to prepare, or they think that possibly, it's just the underlying text here means that this is new text proposed. So they want these powers to prepare for a pandemic. We won't even need to have one for them to have this power. And they can work with potential all risks to public health, not just actual risks, but potential. This is the graphic I made when we first went over this back in February, and I stand by it. This, if you read the document, does in fact give the World Health Organization the right for your country's government to define the next pandemic, determine lockdown. So if you say live in a place like Sweden, who says we're not locking down, we think that, we can handle this through another way. The WHO absolutely could make your country do it. They can survey you. They can determine the treatments. They can put in place vaccine mandates. They absolutely control the vaccine distribution and the intellectual property and profits. And they can redistribute basically everything, including farmland. What do they call it? Human interaction, human land use, wildlife trade, animal environment interface is what they called it. And the biggest problem with this is that we don't need it. The WHO did a crap job during the COVID pandemic, and we as humans, we got through it. We're here now. We don't need them to show us that they can do another crap job by having more powers. This is the last organization you would look to as a success in order to get more powers. But again, they're taking these powers under the auspices of emergency. So I brought one of my favorite quotes from Herbert Hoover, that didn't roll off the tongue, says, every collectivist revolution rides in on a Trojan horse of emergency. It was the tactic of Lenin, Hitler, and Mussolini. It is the collectivist sweep over a dozen minor countries of Europe, and it was the cry of men striving to get on horseback. And emergency became the justification of the subsequent steps. The technique of creating emergency is the greatest achievement that demagoguery attains. Demagoguery. I'm sorry, you guys. So, again, now having reviewed the actual documents of the pandemic treaty, let's again look at Dr. Tedros' tweet saying that it will not impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates, and it will not supersede your country's sovereignty, and that talking about it, countries should prevent us from talking about it in a way that they think is spreading lies, fake news, and conspiracy theories. He's lying. I'm sorry, but he is. That's a lie. And in the U.S., there is a movement to demand that the president and Congress not sign this treaty and, in fact, withdraw totally from the WHO, which I support. We had Dr. Kat Lindley on the show last week telling us all about this. In the UK Parliament, there also is discussion about this. Tell your elected representatives that you do not support this, unless you do, and in which case, tell me why. Because to me, it's lunacy.
Maybe you support Bill Gates. Bill Gates, 88% of the WHO's philanthropic funding comes from Bill Gates. So 88%. So I saw someone in the chat saying, who funds the WHO? Well, there's one of your big answers.
Yeah, I think Bill Gates is up to 80% or something like that.
I just said 88%.
Is that?
Oh, sorry. Clearly I'm listening.
Is that one of the treaties that Trump pulled us out of, or was that a different one?
No, I don't think that Trump.
No. There was other treaties. The Paris Accords. There was other treaties. I don't think.
Did he
pull us out of the WHO?
For some reason, yeah.
I think he might have. You might be right about that. I have to go back to my notes on that, but
I don't remember.
I don't know. Let us know in the chat on that one. I forget. There was a lot of treaties that Trump was like, no, we're not a part of that. Paris Accords specifically, the Paris Climate Accords, and was the WHO pandemic treaty?
WHO might have been one because he said we're paying too much. We're paying disproportionately.
Well, it was certainly, NATO and the United Nations. There was a lot of things that Trump was like, why are we carrying the burden for all of this? I don't know about the WHO piece of that. Thank you guys so much.
I was just going to say on July 6, 2020, U.S. administration officially notified UN Secretary Guterres that intention to withdraw from WHO. Trump administration sends letter withdrawing U.S. from WHO over coronavirus response.
Okay. So there you go.
Okay, I thought that was
Biden ran right back into it then, full steam ahead.
Right back into the arms
of the WHO.
Abusive lover.
All right, we got more news to get to here on your Tuesday. We're going to look at Canada. Why is Canada trying to ban Tucker Carlson? It's funny. I was texting Tucker a little while ago about this, and it's real. It's real, and they're trying to ban Tucker Carlson from going into Canada. We're going to find out what their plan is to keep him away from giving a speech there. And what do they say about Tucker Carlson? Is it his anti-war stance? Is it his anti-violence stance? It is anti-Zelensky stance? What is it? Is his anti-Nazi stance? There's a lot of Nazis now in Canada. They sought refuge there after World War II. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Let us know your thoughts on that. We'll get to that. But first, we want to tell you about gold because I don't know if you guys saw it today. We got great CPI numbers. Consumer Price Index numbers. Now, this is Great news for gold. It's great news for real estate. Not so great for U.S. Treasuries and not so great for the U.S. dollar. But we did see CPI come in much cooler than anticipated. So that's a great sign that inflation may be coming down a little bit. We're going to have to see what happens after the Christmas, the holiday season. Temporary hiring dries up and what that means for a possible recession in early 2024 if the inflation continues to percolate. But I believe this is really good for real estate, and it was certainly good for gold. Just look at gold prices today and silver prices. They skyrocketed as a result of this CPI news. Now, Natalie and I are big investors in all of those things, silver, gold, and real estate. And our friends at Lear Capital can actually help you get set up with a self-directed account that allows you to invest in any of those things that is not controlled by Wall Street. A self-directed IRA is a very powerful tool, and it started in the 1970s. People think, oh, this is a new thing. No. The reason you don't know about it is because Wall Street doesn't advertise it because they don't make money off of it. So these custodians that set up your account, they make very little money on it, and you then get to control your own destiny. You can invest in gold, you can invest in silver, you can invest in real estate, you can invest in anything you want. You can even buy stocks inside of your self-directed account. But they don't make the money that they make off of 401k plans and traditional IRAs and all that other stuff. That's how Wall Street makes their money. That's how these big banks make their money. So anyway, our friends at Lear Capital can actually help you get set up with a self-directed gold IRA. So the self-directed account, you can then invest in gold, silver, and they have a custodian they work with, and it's very minimal. In fact, we use their custodian that they work with. I think it's Equity Trust. And Equity Trust, they only charge what is the cost per year for them to be a custodian? We have that. Sorry, that's who runs it.
It's a couple hundred.
It's like a couple $100.
It's not very much.
So that's how, think about the difference in fees that you have from a 401k plan versus your own self-directed account. Anyway, Lear can help you get set up with it, and then you can actually buy gold and silver inside of the account. All you need to do is call their 800 number. They're fantastic. I encourage all of you to try it, at least learn about it. You'll get a free gold investor guide. Just call 1-800-613-3557. You can go to learredacted.com. That's also the website you can check out. We'll have a link in the description if you want it below as well. And right now you can receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase of gold or silver inside of your account. Now, you don't have to buy it inside of the self-directed retirement account. You don't have to. But the benefit of it, of course, is that it grows tax-free. It grows tax-free. So when you retire, you can pull out all of that appreciation of real estate and rent and all of those things tax-free. Again, Wall Street doesn't want you to know about it for a reason. So call them today, 1-800-613-3557, or go to learredacted.com. Well, the tolerant left in Canada is at it once again, now trying to ban Tucker Carlson from entering the country in January of this year. They don't want him to give a speech. So what in the world is happening in Canada? Let's check in with David Creighton, who's in Ottawa. David, why are you guys trying to keep Tucker out of your country?
Well, I'm certainly not. I'm a huge fan of Tucker, and I love what he's doing for media, for journalism. But he's coming to Calgary on January 24th, and he will be interviewing Premier Danielle Smith, the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to introduce more Canadians to Tucker Carlson. And I think he has a lot of fans up here. When he was on Fox, a lot of Canadians watched his show despite the difficulties in getting Fox on cable for many, many years up here. But I think it's a great idea. He's coming to Calgary. And if there's any hope for Canada, it lies in politicians like Danielle Smith in Alberta, who stands up against the woke crowd, who dared to stand up against COVID-19 mandates and to say that these were ridiculous, these were ineffective and discriminatory. She had the guts to say that these were discriminatory measures. So if there's any hope for Canadian politicians, I certainly think Danielle Smith is chief amongst that class. And I'm very happy to see Tucker coming. But yeah, some idiot out there has sponsored a petition on change.org. I just looked at it this morning to see how it's going since I wrote the story. It's up to about 2,700 signatures, as people. So that's not a lot, but I can't believe anybody would actually have a petition asking Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to not allow Tucker Carlson to cross the border. Ludicrous.
What is their reasoning for this? Like, what are they objecting to that Tucker has said? Is it his anti-war stance? Is it his position on Ukraine? Is it his anti-Nazi stance? I know Canada is home to a lot of Nazis who left after World War II and have fled to Canada to be there. So I know that maybe speaking out against Nazis is a bad thing. What do you think it is that they really dislike about Tucker up there in Canada?
Well, I think it's undoubtedly his stand on the war in Ukraine, that he thinks enough is enough. Stop sending billions of dollars to this war. Stop fomenting the war. Stop keeping the war going. I think that's the reason, as you said many times, he was fired from Fox News, and I think that's the real reason. But the opposition leader in Alberta, the leader of the provincial New Democratic Party, which are a bunch of socialists, Rachel Notley, talked about Tucker Carlson being hateful. She kept saying hateful, hateful, hateful. And she says the fact that the premier believes it's appropriate to normalize the things this person says. Like what?
Like what?
Nothing.
Give us an example.
And, she accuses Tucker Carlson of being a white supremacist, of believing in crackpot theories about eliminating all the non-whites from society. I mean, these are all crackpot theories coming from crackpots. Tucker Carlson has never espoused, in all the years I've been listening to him, any white supremacist ideas. He is opposed to the war in Ukraine, as I am, as you are, and a lot of people are opposed to the war in Ukraine. But Tucker Carlson does not represent some kind of political extremism. And I think it's interesting that when he entered the Madison Square Garden on the weekend with Donald Trump by his side, he had a standing ovation. I mean, and huge cheers from New York City, where he's supposed to be like anathema, and Donald Trump is supposed to be so evil. It interests me that I think these people represent such a small, marginalized minority of people who really hate Tucker Carlson because he's got the guts to take journalism where it simply won't be taken elsewhere. And he's left Fox News. He held his head up high, and he's got the biggest show on X now, formerly known as Twitter. So he's now become part of independent journalism, and he's doing what a lot of other people are doing, fighting back outside of those boundaries. Because when you're in, as you know so well, when you're working within legacy media, your hands are shackled and your tongue is not free to speak.
Well, it's hilarious. I mean, it's hilarious that thousands of people don't want someone to speak. And of course, this speaks to the idea of the tolerant left, right? The idea that the left is supposed to be a place where all ideas are welcome. Free speech. We embrace free speech on campus. The idea that you could go to a college campus and give a speech with differing opinions and different views. And then, of course, we've seen the erosion of free speech. We've seen the erosion of the tolerant left. This idea of the tolerant left has all but collapsed. Now we will shout you down. We will silence you. We will cancel you. We will block you on social media. We will have these social media companies do their bidding to block you and take you offline. And the Canadian government, under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, is specifically targeting those on the right and those who have conservative views.
Very definitely. And I remember growing up, and a lot of my teachers in high school and in university had gone through the 1960s and had been somewhat radicalized by those years. But what was interesting is that generation believed in free speech, and they allowed people like me who disagreed with some of the things they said to voice that opposition, to have a voice of dissent in the classroom. And I think that's very telling, because the left today, the woke left, will brook no criticism, will not tolerate any dissent, will not listen to any views other than their own. And we're seeing this not just in the media, but in politics, and especially in education, where people, the teachers and the professors that I knew, are no longer welcome at universities because they allow people to talk back. They allow people to disagree. They allow an open discourse, an open debate. That is something the left has long forgotten, at least the woke left. And what we're dealing with today, these people can't even really call themselves socialists or liberals. They are fascists in every sense of the word. They are fascists who want to clamp down on anybody who doesn't agree with them. And as you said, Justin Trudeau is one of them. He is running his government not like a liberal, small L, or large L liberal government. He's running his government increasingly like a fascist government that clamps down on dissent. And as I've said 100 times now to anybody who's listening, the worst is yet to come with the Online Safety Act. We saw it in the UK. It was introduced a couple of months ago, and it's going to happen in Canada. And I don't know what we have to do or can do to stop Justin Trudeau from doing this because, and this might be a nice segue to the next topic, he seems pretty guaranteed to propping up his government now with the support of opposition parties in the House of Commons. And that's a frightening prospect.
So to our non-Canadian viewers and to our Canadian viewers who are watching and might not understand what's actually happening in Parliament right now and what the Trudeau government is trying to do to try to remain in power, can you break it down for us? How is Trudeau trying to hang on to power there in Canada?
Well, he already reached a loose coalition with the New Democratic Party. This is the Socialist Party. They only have about 25 seats in the House of Commons, but it's just enough for Trudeau to retain a majority of votes on any confidence motions. Now, they've been wavering of late because they're worried about losing their base because a lot of the people who vote New Democrat are saying, why are you siding with Trudeau on so many of these policies that we can't agree with and that we're uncomfortable with? And a lot of the caucus members are feeling the same way. So when the NDP voted with the Conservatives on a motion to extend this carbon tax pause, as Trudeau calls it, Trudeau got worried and he started looking for more support in the House of Commons. And he had a secret meeting with the Bloc Québécois, which is an outright separatist party. They want Quebec to separate from Canada. That's all they're about. They're not there for any degree of federalism. They are only in the House of Commons to try to entice Quebec to separate, to fight for that. Now, Trudeau has forged some kind of alliance with the Bloc. He won't say what he promised them. He won't say if it's financial. He won't say what kind of goodies he had to hand over to the separatists to get his way. But we know a deal was reached. And this is quite ironic because the one thing you can say about Trudeau's father, who was prime minister for about 15 years in Canada, despite all of his faults and failings, he at least was a true federalist who did not support separatism. And he went out of his way to say that on many occasions. He would never have worked with separatists to prop up his government. But Justin Trudeau has no ethics. He has no morality. He is the most amoral prime minister that I can remember, and I do believe in Canadian history. He will do whatever he wants to do or has to do to maintain his grip on power. That's 2 more years, and I believe in those next 2 more years, he can inflict more damage on this country than he's already done in 8 years. And the potential for catastrophe, not just economic, but social and political, is so obvious that I am frightened for the prospect of this country's future right now.
I am too. I have to say, to me, back in the day, and I'll just get you out of here on this. Back in the day, when I was in, I think, elementary school, I had to write reports on the provinces of Canada in the United States. I had to learn about Canada, and I was fascinated by this country. And I thought, oh, what a peaceful place, what a beautiful place, very tolerant place, and it's in many ways unrecognizable to those young elementary school eyes that I had back in the day. And I can't tell you just the stories that we hear out of Canada, the clamping down on media, the clamping down on independent press, free speech. It's really, really troubling. And trying to ban Tucker Carlson from Canada, it's remarkable. David Creighton, though, is not trying to ban Tucker Carlson from Canada. You can read his great writings over at the Post Millennial, also his YouTube channel, Creighton's Right. David, keep fighting the good fight up there in Canada. Hopefully we can restore Canada to its former glory.
Hopefully, and my prayers are always also with the United States, because I used to always go across the border and say, I feel a lot freer. I'm in the United States. But I think that United States had much more to do with Ronald Reagan than it ever will with Joe Biden. And I hope the United States as well regains the freedom and the sense of liberty that country always had. And so we have a job ahead of us.
I agree. I think we could foment change from the inside, both in Canada and the United States. Let's remake North America for the better. That'll be our mission here at Redacted. Thank you, David. Great to see you as always.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. That's something actually you and I were just talking about today. Like, can we, from inside the United States, try to bring about a peace movement inside the United States? There used to be big peace movements a long time ago. They've really fallen by the wayside. We featured one big anti-war movement protest here with Roger Waters, of course, last year, but really it's quiet.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a quiet movement, unfortunately. So hopefully we can all be, anti-war and get members of the military involved, because the biggest champions of anti-war very often come from those who have served and realize that it's awful, and members of the military who do not want to go off and take over other countries. So let us know your thoughts on that. Mighty Dot in our chat says, Clayton, why are you ignoring my comments and my super chats? So I checked, Mighty Dot. I haven't seen any super chats from you today. But thank you. And you said the people of Biafra want their voices heard too. And so I had to look up what Biafra is. And I didn't know this, but Biafra is officially the Republic of Biafra. It was a partially recognized country in West Africa that declared independence from Nigeria. It existed from 1967 until 1970. See, you learn something every day, Mighty Dot. But I haven't seen any super chats from you, and I won't ignore you, I promise. All right, we've got more news to get to here on your Tuesday. We're going to look at Portugal's green scandal. This whole net zero garbage, has it claimed a major victim in the Prime Minister of Portugal? We'll tell you about that in a moment. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Indeed, because the thing about hiring is that when you're running your own business, you know that every single hire counts, and you can't afford to waste money searching for candidates and paying the wrong person and then hiring a new person if you've hired the wrong person. Well, Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract and interview and hire all in one place. So don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all on Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, Assessment, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting? Well, US Indeed data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they post a job. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to take your job than candidates who only see it on search, according to US Indeed data. So join the over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you have the right to make every dollar count. So you need Indeed and only pay for those quality applications that match your requirements. So right now, find great talent and go to Indeed.com/redacted. One more time, that's Indeed.com/redacted. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Recently, Portugal's Prime Minister Antonio Costa resigned over allegations of corruption in connection to lithium mining. Now, his offices were raided and the president is seeking his replacement. He says he's done nothing wrong, but it brings up this question of a green scandal. So we invited Alexandre Guerreiro. He is a Portuguese political scientist and commentator to do commentary for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to join you here.
Excellent. So can you tell me a little bit about what you know about the downfall of Prime Minister Antonio Costa?
Well, it all started with an investigation made by the public attorney concerning the case of the concession that was given by his Ministry of the Environment in order to allow a certain company to explore the lithium business here in Portugal. Problem is that under Portuguese law, the company that can work and can explore lithium in Portugal, it can only be possible if that company at least has 35 years of experience. And the company to which it was given that right, that company was created only 3 days after the celebration of this agreement, which means that this could not be possible, at least under Portuguese law, to be celebrated. So the public attorney started to investigate what was behind this. And what the public attorney found was that it was not only lithium, it was only the hydrogen, and at the same time a data center that was being built in the south part of the country and in the region. All these businesses had one person in common, which was António Costa's prime minister, the chief of staff, who had already worked previously with former socialist prime minister José Sócrates, who is now being tried for embezzlement scandal. And at the same time, this person was kind of a facilitator in order to make direct contacts with António Costa, as well as with other members of the government, in order to allow certain businesses to be done here, even if they violate or they pose a threat to the environment. For example, the Portuguese Agency for the Environment, that company had the need to issue a specific license in order to allow specific businesses and projects to be built and implemented in Portugal. However, that same agency, they always gave green light to all kinds of specific projects that had behind people connected to the Socialist Party in those companies. For example, this company that was created three days before the celebration of the agreement, they had as a financial consultant a former Secretary of State of a socialist government. So what's in common here is that we have the Prime Minister as the head of the government, and at the same time his Chief of Staff, although we don't know yet if he was actually one of the persons to gain any kind of benefits from these businesses. However, the Ministry of the Environment was always behind all these businesses. That's why we had this now minister that he resigned, but he was back then Secretary of State for the Energy that he now presently resigned, and he was formally and officially considered to be a suspect.
Okay. Now, this brings up so many different questions because, in Europe, where bureaucracy is the lay of the law of the land. Europeans, they love bureaucracy. I don't know how I would get away with anything being an expat here. But green projects are not highly scrutinized, and the European Union has so much money that they're throwing at it. So maybe it seemed like almost too tempting because of this appetite for bragging about green accomplishments. Do you think that's part of it?
Oh, absolutely, because what we see is that first, the European Union and each European Union member, they create a need. They first start to prohibit and to ban specific kinds of technologies. Then they need to create the need, so the answer to that ban. And that's where we can see, for example, consultants that are nominated for specific and key positions in most of the companies that then are allowed to work on these sectors. For example, not only this green energy, but also if we take a look at public-private partnerships, it happens exactly the same. And this is where former members of the government, of not only the Portuguese government, but other EU governments, they can find a place to not only work, but to have a monopoly. So this kind of green need that we all now are hearing over and over each day, what this has behind it is that they want to create a specific need to which there are specific companies that will give the answers we need in order to address the climate crisis, so on and so forth. But in the end, we can see that there's not too much scrutiny, like you said. For example, from the scientific point of view, there are not enough evidences that the solutions that are being created and the bans that are being implemented all over Europe actually have any kind of scientific evidence and facts that are already confirmed.
Right. It's a solution in search of a problem. is what it
Indeed.
seems to be. And the EU, here's some of the numbers, has already committed to spending 270 billion euros for the Green New Deal by the end of 2030. Meanwhile, you and I both know the economy in Europe is not good. It's so expensive, getting more and more expensive. Do Europeans seem to know that this is not necessarily a good deal when especially we see these green initiatives that don't pay off and do not actually prove themselves to be better for the environment?
It only pays off for these companies and also for these former members of each cabinet, because they get not only the monopoly and the exclusive right to explore specific resources, but at the same time, they can still avoid any kind of competition in those sectors at the same time that they take political decisions, which means that it's up to them to choose if there are other actors to make part of that kind of business, and at the same time, if there is any kind of other circumstance that can help those companies to earn money. The taxpayers, they don't get any kind of money from here. For example, as we saw here in this lithium process, they don't get any kind of money. They are just going to pay to these companies. And that we can see, for example, not only in Portugal, but if we take a look at the Netherlands, the way they are destroying the agricultural projects that they have already implemented for decades in the country, in order and inspired by this Green Deal that they want to implement here in Europe, so on and so forth. So what we see is the taxpayers investing money in their own politicians and at the same time in companies. And that's a reason why we see more and more people trying to express themselves against not only this kind of Green New Deals, but at the same time against their own politicians. And that's how we see some kind of surprising results all over Europe, even here in Portugal.
Right. I wanted to ask you about this video that went viral a couple of weeks ago about some Portuguese motorists taking these Just Stop Oil protesters and just dragging them off the streets and saying, we're not having this here. My favorite is a man who runs out at about 18 seconds with a hockey stick. My husband goes, who's playing hockey in Portugal? We don't have that much ice. So I wonder.
Rollerblades.
Right. It must have been rollerblades. Okay, that's what it was. We joke that I'm afraid of motorists in Portugal. They're very aggressive. And now that I know they carry these sticks, I'm going to be even more careful. But do you think that this is indicative of the Portuguese tolerance for these false promises of green initiatives?
Yes, I mean, the Portuguese people usually, we allow that, okay, if you want to save the environment and protect the environment, do it by yourself. But please don't push me to the same fight where you are. Don't take me to the same places and don't force me to make sacrifices in my own life, at least until we don't have replacements. How can we change cars? How can we change even our own clothes, for example, in order to change them for other options if there are no other options to this? So we need this in our daily life. So this is just what we call here rhetoric, because people, of course, everyone is in favor of protecting the environment, but please don't throw your garbage in the floor or to the seas. People are able to do this kind of sacrifice, I'll put it between commas, but not to sacrifice their quality of life that they enjoy presently. For example, sacrificing the use of cars, the use, for example, of not only mobile phones, but other means and other technologies that usually are connected with pollution, unless someone finds a solution. And people are sick and are getting tired of this because they are being dragged to this kind of fight, to this kind of struggle that they don't want to be a part of.
Right. It reminds me of the opposition to Salazar, that he was not allowing enough progress for Portugal in relation to the rest of Europe. And so now environmentalists are sort of doing that, which they were critical of him for. I do want to ask you, though, about this group of left-wing politicians in Europe now, because Antonio Costa was what maybe the Telegraph is calling the last of them, the last of this dream team that included Finland's Sanna Marin, Germany's Olaf Scholz, Denmark's Mette Frederiksen, from Malta, Robert Abella, Pedro Sanchez from Spain. I would also add Mark Rutte from the Netherlands. Do you think it's fair to say that he was the last man standing from the left, and that we are now going to see this sort of European shift over towards centrist policies?
I don't agree with that just because this is not pure socialism. It was a mix between socialism and capitalism. I remember a story with President Emmanuel Macron where he said about Antonio Costa that it was quite surprising for Macron to find out that Antonio Costa was able to sacrifice the rights of the workers of the maritime ports in order to protect the Chinese investors' rights. And he said it was quite surprising to find some kind of socialism of this type. So to a certain extent, he is actually pure social ideology defender, so on and so forth. But to another extent, he wasn't that kind of socialist as we all think. I don't think even Mark Rutte, of course, he's a liberal, but at the same time, he's a liberal with very left views in certain particular issues. It's not just because Antonio Costa defended certain specific values and principles, for example, from the moral perspective, that could be connected and linked with the left wing, that we can call him a socialist. But his government had actually several groups, some more leftist than others. And Antonio Costa was actually part of one of the most right-wing groups from his own party. However, because everybody was earning, it was actually quite good, not only for him, but also for his party, because everybody was winning here. But I don't think he could be called the last man standing as being one of the leftists. I think that if we want to consider all the European continent as a whole, we have, for example, Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, yes, he's one of those, but I don't think we find much like him.
Okay. So some of this rhetoric about possibly, the Socialist Party having to work now with the right-leaning Chega party in order to survive. Do you think that that's rhetoric, or maybe indication that there will be more of a meeting in the middle?
No, it's highly unlikely that in the next elections that the Socialist Party will be joining Chega, because they actually belong to totally different ideologies. But what here brings me more curiosity is about the Social Democrats, because Portugal is the only case in the whole European Union where a Social Democratic Party belongs to the right wing. All others belong to the Socialist Party, not to a right-wing party. So, and until recently, the Social Democrats leader, he said that this was considered a red line. He was not going to form a coalition with Chega, whether a formal coalition or an informal coalition. But if he wants to rule, the only option he has is Chega. So what I believe here is that if Pedro Nuno Santos wins the elections in the Socialist Party, it is not so unlikely to see him win the elections. The problem is that it will be more likely for other left-wing parties to lose their votes rather than the Socialist Party. At the same time, I believe that Chega, of course, will increase a lot its representation in the parliament. However, in the end, if the Socialist Party cannot get a majority with his left-wing partners, then I believe that we will have to do more elections in order to find a clearer solution, because the country will get into an impasse where we have to choose. What kind of party do we want? Do we want the socialists ruling and they would be able to gain another majority, or we want the right wing to rule? And in case the right wing will have the right to rule, we have here a challenge, which is to see how close Chega can get from the Social Democrats, because Chega has been able to gather around its own party supporters, not only from the right wing, who are sick of this system, who are tired of all this, but also from the left side, which is actually interesting. And it's funny to watch, but we can actually get into a political unstable situation. And we might have more elections until we have a more clear solution for the country.
Okay, well, inshallah. Now, I before we decided to discuss this, I'm an expat living in Portugal. You're in Portugal. We're both in the Lisbon region. And I had asked you, do you think it's safe to discuss this? And I think it's so sad that I have to these days, because we see free speech is being tamped down in Germany, in France, in England as well. And so, you still feel safe discussing these things, which is great. Can you talk just a little bit more about, whether or not Portugal's going to hold on to these freedoms?
Actually, I don't feel safe at all. I just don't give a damn now, presently.
Okay.
I'm absolutely sick of all this, because I have been persecuted by the society and by the system itself because of my positions concerning Russia. I have been losing opportunities to work in universities. People treat me like if I have some kind of disease and I can transmit the disease to that person. I have to work with the foreigner universities. So this is my condition now. So that's why I really don't care about what can happen to me, because I don't think it will happen more than this, because the Portuguese usually, they don't like to push you and to tease you, and at the same time to sacrifice you and turn you into a martyr. But what they like is just to isolate you. They leave you on the side. And if you don't have friends, if you don't have opportunities to work, if you don't have any other opportunity to do whatever you want, then they believe, we here in Portugal usually believe that way you will learn where is the good way and how to come back again to the good way. So, but freedom of speech, of course, is in danger in some countries because of violence. Yes, it's true, in some European countries because of violence. Here, we don't have that specific kind of violence. Here, what we have is this strategy: isolate the person, leave the person alone, trying to lose everything she has, all the opportunities, and by that, trying to force the person to change her position. This is how people work. But of course, and not only, if I think about other cases, for example, I can look at the Portuguese society and I can see that if I want to develop my career, if I want to have a better quality of life, I must be a part of what we call mainstream opinion, because otherwise we will be considered to be a threat. And our system is not based on meritocracy. That doesn't exist. So it's a different kind of pressure, like the other kind of pressure that, for example, people see in Germany, in France, in Italy. Okay, that's way too strong and way too hard. But here we work more like that. So yes, freedom of speech is here in danger. When we see the attempts to create entities and regulations over freedom of speech, and at the same time for the social media, what we can and what we cannot say, when we watch these kind of initiatives, of course our freedom of speech is in danger. Even, for example, now recently with the situation between Israel and Palestine, for example, we can see that those who support a specific opinion and position, they get attacked at least or mocked in a certain way, that the goal is to put pressure on them and to make to put a label on the top of their head saying this person is an extremist. And this works a lot. Social pressure works a lot. And I believe that, of course, we are in danger. And here are the so-called European values, freedom. This is what we have in Europe. People, please, don't fall in an illusion of believing that in Europe we are the land of freedoms, because we are absolutely not.
Yes, I agree with you, and I'm scared of it all the time. But you were brave to talk to me, and I appreciate it. I always appreciate your opinions. You can find Alexandre on his YouTube channel or on Twitter as well. Anywhere else you'd like to tell us about before we let you go?
No, I just want to say to people, please believe in the causes that you actually believe, even if you feel isolated in the middle of a group or of a social group. At least try to get evidence, because when you get evidence, at least no one can attack you for what you think. They have to attack the evidence, and that's way too important.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. It's always a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure, Natalie.
Well, that's going to do it for us at Redacted today. Thank you so much for joining us. And hey, we want to let you know if you like what you see here and you want more content, you want to spend more time with us, we do have a Plus Club. You can find out about it at redacted.inc. It's a way for you to get extra content that we don't put free here for you in addition to the show and the newsletter. So check it out, redacted.inc. While you're there, you can sign up for the newsletter if you haven't already. But yeah, I've been reading a ton of books lately, and I keep promising to do these video blogs about the books. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for you if you join the Plus Club. So give it a try. It's about the price of a cup of coffee every month. So check it out for yourself. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. We will see you back here tomorrow. Remember, Redacted is live every Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We're happy to see you. We're so glad you came. Bye, everybody.